You're in the Business Insurance Zone with me, Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and contributor to Backroom Technician. This week on The Biz, the Truth in Taxation series, and on today's show, stealth taxation flies under the radar with national columnist, certified financial planner, and CPA, Ken Davis.
When it comes to life insurance, annuities, long-term care, disability, or group pension plans, we're the news you can use.
Well, welcome everyone to the Business Insurance Zone, and we're spending this entire week on Truth and Taxation with Mr. CLU, CHFC, CFP, and CPA, Ken Davis. Hey, Ken.
Stephen, good to see you.
Well, it's good to see you, but your disclosures the last couple days haven't been that great to hear, right? I mean, we're talking about an effective rate, we're talking about stealth taxes in this show, we're talking about hidden fees, complex code. It's so convoluted, who can keep it straight? And you just told us, I think it was Monday's show, you said we're spending about $430+ billion just for the compliance issues. I mean, unreal. Today we're talking about some of the hidden taxation. Now let's get right to AMT because finally, we said this, just mentioned this last week, but this week we're talking about AMT. They finally marked it to inflation. Whew, a little bit of relief's going to happen there. I think they had to do it, but they just swapped it out with Obamacare. I don't know, we'll see about that. But talk a little about the AMT.
Well, alternative minimum tax is a second way of determining what your tax is, and it was intended to go after the rich. And the idea was, okay, we're going to give all these deductions and exemptions and everything, and the wealthy people would hire really good tax counsel or attorneys, and then they say, okay, you can get these deductions by doing this, this, and this with your investments. And they were pushing their tax bills down to next to nothing. They said, time out. This isn't fair. We intended these exemptions and deductions and credits for people in general, but you guys are kind of hogging it, okay? So they said, we're going to put in an alternative minimum tax that says, once you have benefits, tax preference items over a certain limit, then we're going to say, okay, we're going to compute a different tax.
Yeah, but wasn't the tax bracket back at that time, wasn't it like outrageous?
Well,
it was on 80, 90%?
Well, there was a time back in '79 where it was 70%, and then the Reagan Revolution came and they dropped tax rates down to 28%. And they did get rid of a lot of the deductions and things. But even then, people were finding ways around it. That was back in the tax shelter days. But you know, one of the things I want to talk about this is the AMT is partially determined by adjusted gross income. And some of the other things we're going to talk about are dependent on AGI. And I want our advisors to start thinking not about taxable income and tax rates. That's important, of course. But AGI is used to determine if alternative minimum tax is going to be there at all, plus the exemptions go with it. So start thinking about AGI and managing AGI, and I'm bringing that up because we as advisors can do something about that.
Well, when I think about AGI, we're talking about the AMT, we're talking about Social Security income, we're talking about Medicare premiums now with this new stealth tax, the Obamacare taxes on top of this, IRA contributions, which do help in the AGI, I mean, I hope you're doing it, and other exemptions, credits, and deductions, which if you missed last week's show, go check it out. We actually break that out for you so that you have a really good understanding of it. But let's shift gears for a second on capital gains. You know, your two lives theory, Ken, you're one of the few guys that actually talks about this. Talk about the two lives theory when it comes to capital gains.
Well, as I was studying Social Security and how to manage that using combination annuities or split annuities, depending upon what you want to call them, I discovered the fact that while capital gains, let's say you have a $10,000 capital gain, and if you ask most everybody, they'll say 15%. Well, now the really affluent are paying 20%, but let's just say 15%. Well, that's $1,500. And everybody goes, oh, okay, capital gain's good, and I only pay as 15%. Well, not so much. You now look at the tax return, how it flows. That's one of the easier ways of understanding the tax law. Go to Schedule D, which is where you report your capital gains. Assuming you have no other capital gains or losses, that $10,000 flows to the front return, page 1. And then it flows down to the bottom number, which is called adjusted gross income. Well, AGI is then used to determine whether Social Security is included, whether you have alternative minimum tax, Medicare premiums escalate, whatever. So now AGI is becoming this really important number and managing it. And so I discovered that capital gain is taxed at 15%, but the entire $10,000 on that example, or the entire long-term capital gain, flows through the tax return, hits AGI, and impacts the deductibility of things like IRA contributions, certain kinds of educational deductions or credits, whether or not you get to deduct your medical expenses, alternative minimum tax, whether you get to make a certain IRA contribution. I mean, all of these different phase outs are dependent on this number called AGI, and yet on the news, what do we hear? Taxable income tax rates, tax rates, tax rates. Tax rates are important, but the real tax rate, the effective tax rate, is that base rate plus the loss of deductions, exemptions, et cetera, or replaced with an alternative minimum tax.
When I look at this, I'm just looking at some of the lists here that we have here that can trigger, this kind of, because it affects AGI so much. And when we're looking at that, then if that's the truth, then advisors, we have to learn how to manage this. We got to learn how to manage the AGI.
That's right. I mean, I grew up in an era where tax shelters, and I know that's a bad term, but tax shelters were things like oil and gas limited partnerships and real estate partnerships and some really crazy things that were really inappropriate. But they got rid of that and they changed the tax law. So what do we have left? Well, we have qualified plans where we get a deduction, but that has limits. What we have is tax deferral. Tax deferral really is the king. Tax deferral means we don't include the income and gross income, which means it doesn't hit AGI, which means that we benefit all these other calculations.
Well, when we think about it, when we're going to hit that issue tomorrow hard as we can ever hit it. When I'm thinking about looking at all the possibilities to manage AGI, that's where, if you say, Steve, I'm really not a 1040 person, I've really never really looked at it, we have a couple of great giveaways. They're actually 1040 overlays. Explanations that are done in English, so even if you're not a scholar in the accounting code like Ken is, you can really apply what you're hearing here today with this nice overlay, this 1040 overlay. We're giving it away. Just hop out to thebiz.tv, say, Steve, I want the overlay, the tax overlay. Once you learn how to start talking about AGI, you can make an impact for your client and maybe even get into the CPA community. When we come back from the break, we're going to continue to address the stealth taxes flying under the radar, part of our Truth in Taxation series with Ken Davis. And don't forget to enroll in IULUniversity.com for the best training, education, and sales support when it comes to life insurance for retirement income.
You're listening to the insurance industry's #1 resource for products, planning ideas, carrier information, and interviews you can use. When it comes to life insurance, annuities, long-term care, disability, or group pension plans, we're the news you can use.
Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, host of the daily internet talk show, The Business Insurance Zone. I've been using Backup Technician for over 20 years for my edutainment workshops, public seminars, and my ultimate resource for my consumer shows. Why? Because it's the best needs analysis and sales support material that addresses almost every financial planning scenario. And now you can test drive Backroom Technician absolutely free for the next 30 days. Go to thebiz.tv and click on the BizBlog menu and sign up for the most powerful resource available to financial advisors. Well, welcome back to the Business Insurance Zone. I'm Steve Savant with Ken Davis. And remember, you can order today's materials at thebiz.tv. And while you're out there, click on the Backroom Technician icon for your free 30-day free trial offer for access to the best needs analysis and client education materials that address almost every financial planning, service, and scenario. And by the way, I'm a contributor to that. Little kudos for me. And moving forward, before you hear on any ideas you hear on our show, always consult your tax advisor and if you're FINRA licensed, your broker-dealer compliance officer. We're continuing to address stealth taxation flying under the radar, part of our Truth in Taxation series with Ken Davis. Ken, I'm talking about, the IRAs now, they bumped this baby up now. They another $500. I think it's $5,500 across the board now. And remember, non-working spouses can even get in on this now. I love that. I think that's great. And then for us who are 50 and older, I know that comes as a shock.
I'm older than 50? Oh my gosh.
I know. People have to say,
that's
Steve, you look 49. And I've been looking for 49 for about a decade. We're talking about being able to throw another $1,000 on top of that. So really, you're talking about $6,500 to an IRA, and even if your spouse is not working, as long as that spouse is over 50, you could really start putting money away. Sometimes putting more money away, not only from the contribution, or the deduction rather, because this is all deductible, but I like the idea of being able to stuff it in. If you had any problems in 2008, and who didn't, right? The market and everything, this is a good time to try to recapture by contribution. Don't try to do it by doubling down on the market alone. That's an issue, but I don't have time for that today. So talk a little bit about, we have the qualified plans online, but talk about this issue, because Ken, you're bringing up a thing that we're going to talk about tomorrow. This kind of leads into tomorrow's show. Accumulation is great, but what happens when we go to distributions and what happens at death? Some of these things really take on a whole new meaning on taxation.
For many years in the financial planning industry, I watched advisors focus on tax deferred buildup. Of course, qualified plans and IRAs do a great job of accumulating wealth. This is another stealth taxation aspect of it. And it's interesting, we had a big push for Roth conversions not too many years ago, and the articles I read and the people I was listening to, I wasn't getting this. And what it is that they're looking at tax rates, and again, they're missing the boat. You put money away, get a tax deduction, get your tax deferral, now you're 65 and you're now in retirement, and you're drawing Social Security. Well, you think you're in a 25% bracket. We talked about this on the other show, and in fact, because the distributions from IRAs cause your AGI to go up, which then includes Social Security income, 85 cents on the dollar potentially, you essentially have $1.85 of taxation for every dollar you earn or it's distributed from your IRA. Suddenly you're in a 42% tax bracket. So if you're really going to compare a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA, or a traditional IRA to life insurance, which functions similarly to a Roth IRA, you're really going to be better off, I think, if you consider the impact of including Social Security and some of these other tax-related items.
Well, I'm sorry, Ken, but I think you have to include Social Security on the distribution, because during your golden years, it's about what's my net take-home pay, what's my cash flow.
Right.
And so when I think about this, remember now, I do. I'm sorry, I'm still sold on this. If you're going to do a 401k and you're in a high tax bracket and you're getting matched from your employer, I say stick it out.
Of course.
Of course.
Up to the match.
But most Americans, middle class especially, that whatever deduction we're getting up front is so not worth what we're going to get hit at the end with our Social Security and our 401k coming out at the same time.
So what's useful about this discussion? What's useful is, as advisors, take a hard look at Roth IRAs or Roth 401ks and look at Roth conversion in a new light to help control adjusted gross income in retirement. So be aware of the accumulation factor, but then look at the distribution factor in retirement and distribution at death. All three of those items are important parts of the financial planning process.
I have some of our consumers who have been unemployed now for a little while, 6-8 months, and again, our heart goes out to you. We have nothing but compassion. I'm wondering if they should move their IRAs now. They have no taxable income. They're on unemployment. Is this a time for them to move over to a Roth?
Well, quite possibly. Each person's situation's different, and our advisors need to look at that, and the CPAs need to help them with that. But the fact is they're in lower tax brackets, and they need distributions to live on anyway,
But if they didn't have any income, they could be paying at the lowest bracket, right? I'm just asking.
But remember, we have a 10% penalty before 59.5, and that's going to enter into that calculation as well. But if they're over 60, they're out of work, it's certainly something to consider.
Just another tactic and a strategy that we're bringing up. We just want to make sure everybody's aware of everything that we can do. We're in our Truth in Taxation series. We're not only uncovering things, but as the week progresses, tomorrow and Friday, we're going to be talking about, hey, there's some solutions here and some ways to play. Now, Ken, when I'm talking about distributions, and we're comparing Roth IRAs, and we're talking about it, we haven't really brought up life insurance as an alternative. Now, if it's done right, it's fabulous. If it's done wrong, it's expensive. It doesn't do anywhere near what the propaganda machine says it does. But let's just assume that we're doing it right. And honestly, I hate to be so egocentric on this, but I think I do it right, and I do it the best possible way for the client. So let's just say, let's go down that. Instead of a Roth, what's this alternative?
Well, and let me give some kudos to you. I was very skeptical as a CPA of life insurance, as most CPAs are. And when I finally understood the benefits of life insurance, how to use it appropriately, I started looking for somebody to help me with that. Well, that was basically you. You taught me how to squeeze down the face value to have increasing, death benefit options, then drop it, to level benefits, and then take out withdrawals first and then gains as loans. Those are very effective tools and can be done appropriately. They're not perfect solutions, but they're there. So we can use life insurance in that manner, just like a Roth IRA. Take the distributions out, put it in a life insurance, get tax deferral just like the Roth, and then tax-free distributions during life and tax-free distributions to death, just like the Roth.
I'm all over that idea, and remember, you can watch all our shows this week on all this at thebiz.tv, and you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Google+. Well, that's the Buzz on the Biz for today. You've been in the zone, the Business Insurance Zone.
You're listening to the insurance industry's #1 resource for products, planning ideas, carrier information, and interviews you can use. When it comes to life insurance, annuities, long-term care, disability, or group pension plans, we're the news you can use.